Welcome to our first instalment of Crucible Catch Up. We'll be trying to have a look back at the previous day's action and go over some of the talking points with an esteemed member of the press and the journalist crew. We're starting off with Ivan Hirschowitz. He's the power that be when it comes to the media office. Well, Ivan, all the papers, all the talk, everything was about Ronnie. But did we really expect it to be that easy for him in the first round?
Well, I think when the draw came out, he might have been, quietly satisfied not to have drawn somebody like Marco Fu or Martin Gould, who were probably the most dangerous qualifiers. But yeah, I mean, he didn't play his best. He looked pretty good in the balls. He said his long putting was a little bit off. Marcus Campbell actually played a lot better than the scoreline suggested, and there were certainly 3 or 4 frames, particularly in the early stages, which could have gone either way. But in the end, 10-4 looks pretty comfortable, and I think O'Sullivan will be quite happy with that.
And the way the press are reporting it, it's Rocket Ronnie romps home. Defending world champion wins 10-4 after year in exile from the game, writes Nick Pitt. That was in the Sunday Times. Everywhere you look, return of the Rocket will send snooker sky high. There are 30 now. There are a whole load of other world-class players still in this championship. But again and again, we come back to Ronnie, and he is pure box office. Yeah,
there was a nice phrase from Nick Pitt in that Sunday article when he said Rusty O'Sullivan was as rusty as a new Bentley in a Park Lane showroom. And despite the fact that he's taken more or less a whole year away from competitive snooker, he still, once he gets going, he will still be the man to beat. And like you say, I think there's people like Neil Robertson, Mark Selby, Ding Junhui, who, if they can play at their best, if and when they come up against him, they can beat him. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating 16 more days anyway.
And also, in spite of the great challenge that no doubt Selby and Robertson and Murphy and Higgins and Williams and all the rest of the guys will do, surely you'd be hard pushed to find another player who could play that well, having done nothing for a year. It is quite incredible.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, who knows what, say, like Neil Robertson took a year away from snooker but practiced for 5 or 6. Who knows? We don't know the answer to that. But I think what's clear is that that 5 or 6 weeks that Ronnie's had, and he's obviously in a good frame of mind. I mean, you spent some time with him last week when you went to his house. You went for a run with him. You did a really good interview, which was on 5 Live the other night. What was your feeling about his mindset and how he's approached the tournament?
Well, basically, I had never experienced him in a more hospitable, welcoming, relaxed and content mood. And I think that's the word, isn't it? Content. You want people to feel comfortable and feel joy in their craft. And, bearing in mind how much joy other people have got out of watching him play, it's nice to think that he's in a place where he's quite happy with the game, and long may that continue. Moving on to other stories, our beloved chairman is never short of a headline or two. Some of them we can go into and some of them we can't. But one we can talk about is Barry's talking about the headline here. Barry says snooker can be sent sky high across the globe, because we already know about the likes of Ding Junhui and Marco Fu and Liang Wenbo, who didn't make it to this tournament but is one of that up and coming crop of Chinese players. We've got Dechuet Pooncheng, a brilliant name, a guy that's come through all 4 qualifying rounds from Thailand. And the point Barry makes is that he reckons, I'm not sure where he's got this figure from, but it must be fairly accurate, it's in the newspapers, 285 million people around the world will be watching this snooker championship. And Bazza goes on to say that sometime soon we're going to go over 300 million. When you compare that to Steve Davis getting 18 point whatever on the black ball final against Dennis Taylor, that's an amazing figure.
Yeah, it is. People kind of hark back quite a lot to that 18.5 million. But that will probably never be repeated in the UK. But in terms of the global audience, snooker is much, much bigger now than it's ever been before. In China there'll be tens of millions of people watching. All throughout continental Europe, the game is becoming extremely popular. In places like Thailand, looks like there's a few really good up and coming players from Thailand. Singapore and a little bit in Australia and Canada, and all through the world, snooker is growing. And I think that's the main goal now for Barry and also Jason Ferguson at WPBSA, to try and get into places where snooker hasn't been popular before. And seeing what's happened in Europe, 10 or 12 years ago, people in Germany hardly knew what snooker is, and now suddenly there's probably 2 million people watching it on Eurosport, and if you can repeat that elsewhere in the world, the sky's the limit, really.
I think it's worth making a point about Eurosport because they are such dedicated broadcasters of snooker now, and you've only got to talk to the audience, and sometimes you ask, where are you from? And it's Bulgaria, Germany, Estonia, Finland, Sweden, countries that you wouldn't traditionally associate with snooker. And the only reason that has happened is because Eurosport have been so dedicated in showing so much of the sport.
Yeah, no, it's been phenomenal, and it just, like I said, it just shows what can happen in a relatively short space of time. Within 10 years, snooker's gone from virtually nothing in certain places to being massive. I mean, we had one of the Betfair European Tour events in Bulgaria last year, and you would have thought Bulgaria would never been a place where people like snooker, but there were, the arena for the final, which was like 1,500 to 1,600 people, was packed out to see Judd Trump and John Higgins, and the atmosphere was something that you would possibly not replicate anywhere apart from the Crucible in the UK, and it was just phenomenal. So it's wonderful to see, and long may it continue.
Well, lots more to talk about over the course of the next 15 days. That wraps up your Crucible Catch Up for today. Please do join me again tomorrow when I'll be joined by another hospitable face of the media room. But plenty more action and plenty more talking points to come here in Sheffield.